What's going on, everyone? Happy Tuesday. Welcome into another edition of GC Live. And boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, we have got some news to talk about. Finally, after 2.5 months since South Carolina and Paul Mainieri parted ways back on March 21st, the Gamecocks, as of June 9th, finally have their next head baseball coach. Welcome in, everyone. Appreciate you guys joining us. As always, I'm Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central. As always, joined by my co-host and good friend, former South Carolina right-handed pitcher, 2010 College World Series champion. And I'm just going to add Hall of Famer at the University of South Carolina Athletics into the mix now every show. Ethan Carter. Ethan, the day has finally come, my friend. We are here. We don't have to speculate and talk about rumors and what's out there anymore. We know it's coming. Kevin Schnall will now be the next head baseball coach for South Carolina baseball. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, man. This went on a little bit longer than I thought it would. But I think it's a good day. It's a good day for South Carolina baseball. We are finally able to start heading in the right direction. I'm excited. I got a hat that's too daggone small from when we won the World Series. People are looking, College World Series. This thing's too small with all my hair now, but it's a day of celebration. It's day to rejoice, and then tomorrow, or shoot, for the coach staff today, the work starts. But we can start looking towards the future and what this program is going to be, hopefully for many, many, many years to come.
Now, it is important to note that this deal is not done yet officially. It's been reported out there by everyone at this point. And so it'll be approved by the Board of Trustees eventually. Now, when is that going to be? I would say probably within the next – hopefully by tomorrow we'll know when the meeting is. Because typically the way this process works, I'm kind of just going off of past situations, like Paul Mainieri, for instance, that process – he was hired on whatever day it was reported by, I think, Baseball America or whatever. And then the next day there was a Board of Trustees meeting to approve contracts for everybody. And then a few days after that was the press conference. So that's typically the way this thing goes, is that it's been reported out there now. They're expected to hire Schnall. I'm sure sometime by like tomorrow, maybe even tonight, we'll know like when the Board of Trustees meeting is. That'll be when the contracts get announced for Schnall. And then we'll talk about Matt Williams as well, who's coming over to South Carolina from Coastal. And then after that, there'll be a press conference. So, yes, there will be a press conference at some point. Maybe it'll be on Friday. We'll see. I would think it'll be this week. It's only Tuesday. So I would think there's going to be all these order of events should happen this week for sure. But definitely maybe by tomorrow we'll have the details of the contract out there. But yeah, man, it's finally happened. The show's kind of going to go a little all over the place just in terms of talking about everything. We've got a lot to get into here. And again, we're kind of doing this show a little bit on short notice since Ethan, I know I asked you this morning, would you want to come on? And this is before we knew the news was going to come out. So I just wanted to be ready just in case. But we're on here, we're talking about this. So let's dive into it, man. So this process has been going on for months at this point. Since Mainieri was let go, the first guy everyone talked about for this job was Schnall, and I feel like it's been that way ever since. Now, it did take some time for this to happen. Coastal season ended well over a week ago at this point. I think we're talking about back into the end of May is when their season ended at the Tallahassee Regional after they went 0-2 in that first round of the NCAA tournament. And it's taken a little bit of time. I think a lot of it that does have to do with that South Carolina's exploring other options as far as other coaching candidates go. But the reality of the situation, Ethan, is that 3 potential coaching candidates are in Omaha this weekend. You got Steve Sabins from West Virginia. You got Skylar Meade at Troy. And you've got Scott Forbes at North Carolina. Now, how realistic were any of those candidates? And we get the question here from Coleman Johnson. There was some real interest For South Carolina to there was some real stuff there for South Carolina to go ahead and try to land Steve Sabins from West Virginia. He was viewed as one of the top 2 candidates for this job at one point. But obviously, I think you're playing a little bit of a risk with the waiting game of if you waited on any of those guys that are in Omaha, you're talking about maybe waiting 2 weeks at most. And that's a gamble I don't think South Carolina needed to take. I think they did their due diligence with this hiring process. We're going to figure out – we'll hear more from Jeremiah Donati when the press conferences and whatnot about how this all came together. I think that's going to be really interesting to hear his perspective on things. But I think you were at a point where it's like you got Schnall right here. He obviously wants to come here. And what's the point in waiting, and risking not getting Schnall? But also, there's no guarantee that South Carolina would have gotten any of those other guys that are in the College World Series. I think Sabins is gonna stay at West Virginia. I don't think Forbes is going anywhere. The one you can maybe say is a Skylar Meade because of his connections here to South Carolina, and that job obviously being a huge step up from Troy.
Yeah,
but beyond that, I mean, you don't want to get yourself into a 2017 Kevin O'Sullivan situation where he's verbally going to be at South Carolina. And then Florida goes on and wins the College World Series. And then Florida gives him the stadium upgrades and everything and the contract. So, yeah, I think – I know it took time, but look, it's June 9th. You have plenty of time for the portal. You're going to bring a ton of guys in from Coastal. I think we've already seen a handful enter the portal, even a bunch of guys here lately enter the portal. You're going to get some guys back. I know – for sure that there are some guys that would be interested in coming back to South Carolina. Some guys that are in the portal, some guys that haven't made decisions yet. I do know there are some that are willing to be back here. But again, that is a process where you meet with the new coach, the coaching staff, and then you kind of decide from there what you're going to do. So we will see. There's a lot of moving pieces with this. But I guess just the basic question to ask right off the rip, man, is just what do you hope Kevin Schnall can do at South Carolina? What is your realistic hope and expectation for the rest of the decade here with Kevin Schnall? We don't know how long the contract's going to be. We don't know the details of that yet. But one can imagine this is going to be a deal that would probably run through into the 2030s.
Yeah. I mean, over the next decade, I expect to be back at Omaha. I think you don't leave a job like Coastal if those aren't the expectations he has for himself. How quickly that gets done, that's going to be, time's going to tell on that. But yeah, I mean, I expect this team I expect hosting and super regional appearances to be more of a yearly thing. And I expect, a couple of appearances in Omaha, over the course of this, his tenure, early tenure. I mean, again, one of the big things we why Schnall was so appealing is that he is on the younger side. He is getting into his, kind of the meat of his coaching career. He was an assistant for many, many years, and he finally got the head job. And so I don't think Kevin Schnall is going anywhere. Like I said, if the winning happens, I think, Kevin Schnall is going to be the head baseball coach of South Carolina until he doesn't want to coach anymore. So I'm very ambitious on what can happen. I'll, ask a question to you. I'm going to be very interested. I want to get your opinion on the type of ball this is going to be. I can't tell you how many times I've seen the University of South Carolina lay down a sack bunt in the last 5-6 years.
Yeah.
It's Schnall ball for a reason. So kind of how do you think this is going to kind of manifest itself with South Carolina's been, at different iterations, different things, but, getting the runner over, stealing bases, pitching and defense, that hasn't exactly been the calling card for the Gamecocks for a long time.
No, it's going to be different, man. And I think I'm very curious to see if that style sticks, because
Yep.
Coastal was one of the top teams in the country when it came to like most sack bunts, like you kind of, excuse me, like you kind of alluded to there. So one can imagine that approach would stay with him as he comes here to Columbia. Now, who's he going to hire as his hitting coach? We don't know that yet. Again, all we know at this point is you got the pitching coach, you got your head coach. Beyond that, I know there's stuff out there about like who they could bring in as a recruiting coordinator on our site on 3. Go check us out there with GamecockCentral.com, thebigspur.com for more info on that. But we'll see where the other pieces fall here. But I think at the end of the day, kind of like what we saw here the last 2 years, like the head coach is the one that's going to make the decision on like what this offense is going to look like. Yep. And we see a lot of the SEC is this power-oriented approach, and you see it at Georgia right now. I mean, they're off to the College World Series because they have the best offense in the country, and they hit for a ton of power. We're seeing a lot of teams like that. But I think there is something to be said about the small ball approach. I think Kentucky's a perfect example of a team that loves to steal bases, move runners over, do the little things to win baseball games. And it's proven to be successful. I mean, Nick Mingione led Kentucky to the College World Series 2 years ago. So it can be done, but I'm just curious to see if it would work at South Carolina and in the SEC. If not, then do you need to change and adapt? And I'm not putting a ton of stock into what happens next year. I think, honestly, man, whatever happens next year is whatever happens. If they get to the postseason, great. If not, 2028's the year where it's like, all right, you kind of – because you're working with what you've got heading into next year. You can build a good team for 2027. You're going to have guys come in from the transfer portal. You're going to have players come in from Coastal. You'll have guys staying at South Carolina. But we really won't get a full scope of what things look like until you get to the second season and beyond. So, yeah, whatever happens next year is whatever happens. But I think next year may be a good time. Don't you think next year would be a good time to kind of try and see if this approach and style works? And if it doesn't, then maybe that's when you have to, shift your philosophy a little bit. But that's down the road, man. We don't know what for sure it's going to look like. It's a good question to ask Schnall eventually here of how does that style, how do you foresee that working at South Carolina? And is that going to be the style of play you play with? But it's no doubt something that would be different.
Yeah, no, because I mean, like, hallmark of some of these Coastal teams. I mean, back when I played, we played Coastal in the Super Regional to go to Omaha in 2010. And, back when Gilmore was there and Schnall, Schnall was obviously an assistant under Gilmore. Again, pitching, speed, defense, just things that we don't typically see from a South Carolina baseball program. So I'm fascinated by it. I think it is. I think it's going to be a great litmus test, like you said, in year one. Put it to the test. If I had to guess, Coastal's had a few guys already enter the portal. I would expect a good number of them follow Coach Schnall over here to Columbia. So I definitely would. I want to see what it is. I'd love to see this team be a little more active in on the base paths. And like I said, it's going to be fascinating to see. It's exciting. I think last time we did this with Maneri, it was he was running back a team that we'd already seen with a couple of additions, and this is truly a makeover with a coach that's invested, has been coaching for the last few years, and has a way he likes to do things. And I'm just super excited to see what it is. Super excited about Matt Williams being back. He's worked with some guys that have had really good careers. Both at South Carolina and then at Coastal. So like we talked about this. This was always kind of what we thought was going to happen. I think some interest from other parties made this a little more intriguing. And if a couple of these schools had lost like it looked like they were going to, either in a regional or a super regional, this might have gotten a little more interesting. But I love the hire with Coach Schnall, and I'm really thrilled about what it could mean. Obviously, like you said, next year, obviously there's got to be improvement because we can't have a third year of having the worst program in history or worst year in program history.
But I think that's kind of the thing, though, man. If you do have another bad season next year,
yeah,
you can't really fault
agreed.
him because, and you do have time to build this team. And maybe it does. Maybe you do have success next year. But I think a lot of that may have to do with who you bring in from Coastal. I think that is number one, because I think that's going to help you build some sort of foundation, especially if you can bring in guys from Coastal that have multiple years of eligibility. I mean, we've seen Coastal can go hang in there with the best programs in college baseball.
Exactly.
So I don't worry about it from that standpoint. I just worry about it from like, what is a reasonable expectation for year one? Is it making the postseason? Is it just not being as bad as you were the last 2 years? I think that would be, if you can get to like, I don't know, let's say 30-something wins next year. I think that would be a step in the right direction. I don't think you necessarily need to make the postseason in year one, but by like, year 2 or 3, you definitely need to be you need to be in the postseason by year 2 for sure.
Yeah, I think improvement in conference play. I think that's what I'm looking for. Which, in my opinion, I like to face myself. I follow the trends and everything. When it comes down to like the RPI and like what gets in, I'm not as well versed. But I think improvement in conference play gets you a 3 seed in the day and times now. They really love the strength of schedule and everything. And I think if this program could just show some improvement and not just get worn out in conference play like they've done the last 2 years, I think that's a win. And then we go from there. Like I said, I'm a little bullish on who I think he can bring in. I think a couple of these guys are in the portal for Coastal. Can come in here and really provide something that we haven't had in a while. We can talk about those names in a little bit. But I just, again, I'm through with the hire. I think it's going to be a boon for in-state recruiting. I think we're going to see we're going to get back to seeing some real good recruiting classes come in out of the high school levels. And I think, you can build it that way and then take on the transfers as they come in, and the financial support that I'm sure was guaranteed, or is being worked on, finalized with Coach Schnall. Like I said, I know nothing's official just yet. But I'm just excited. Like it is something to be excited about. It's the excitement of the unknown.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't want to get, because the last time they made a hire, I think I was very high on the Pulmonary hire, like a lot of folks were, and we know that one went. So
yeah,
I'm kind of keeping it a little bit more reserved this time around, because you just never know, man. You never know. Now, I think it is fair to say South Carolina is going to be a lot better off making this hire. Absolutely. Yes. Like, it was only 2 years ago they were in the postseason. Shoot, I think everyone forgets they were on the verge of being a top 16 seed in 24 until they got swept in the final 2 weekends of the regular season by Georgia and Tennessee. So that's how. That's not, and they're not that far removed from that. I know the last,
and they went toe to toe. Yeah, and they went toe to toe with NC State. We were at that regional together. You obviously were covering. I came down as a fan, but that wasn't like NC State ran them off the field. That was a heck of a regional. I think the elimination game did get a little out of hand, but it is. This program's not, the last 2 years has obviously really, really taken the program to new lows. But this is still a historic baseball program, and with the right guy at the helm, who is who is doing this for the long haul. Again, I think we both were excited about the Mainieri because it was pedigree and, he'd won and all this, but we knew, and I remember us talking about it, like we knew it was like for 3 or 4 years. Like we knew it wasn't going to be a long time. He was here for a good time, not a long time. And it was bad. And so it ended much faster than we thought. I think Coach Schnall is here for the long haul. And I think as long as things go well, which I am optimistic about that happening, the university will keep him around for a long time and make it so that he stays. And I just again, I'm mainly fascinated by the way the baseball translate, the type of ball he wants to play, how it translates to the grind of an SEC schedule. But like you said, because I've seen a few comments from people, just the hiring process was handled so terribly as soon as Coach Tanner stepped down. Guys, Coach Tanner was replaced by National Assistant Coach of the Year. For 2 programs, Coach Holbrook. They went to that ended up not working out. They hired Mark Kingston. Kingston had him in the Super the first year. They were a playoff team, or they were their postseason team.
That was Holbrook's team, though, is the thing.
That's true. But that's, it hasn't been up until the Mainieri thing. It had not been this utterly dreadful baseball program that I see people talk about that's just been handled so poorly. The last 2 years was, again, objectively the worst seasons in program history. But I'm not as down on where we've been prior to those 2 years, and I don't think it's going to take as long to get this thing revved back up and humming out some postseason berths again.
Now, the question we get here, it's a fair question. Why did Coastal struggle down the stretch the end of this season? Yeah. So with Coastal, you got to remember, they dealt, and I know people in the comments are mentioning it here, they had a ton of injuries this season. Their pitching staff was decimated by injuries. I mean, like Cam Flukie, who's going to be, one of the top draft picks probably in this year's draft, is guy that dealt with a ton of injuries this year. So that's something to keep in mind. But there were other guys too that dealt with injuries throughout the year. That's part of it. Now, beyond that, look, it's baseball, right? I think Ethan, you could probably chime in on this thought here. But look, it's baseball, man. You're going to go through some struggles, and I can't help but feel like, and again, this is more so just speculation on my part, I can't help but feel like part of those struggles had to do with something going on here. But again, it took all the way until June 9th for this hire to become, it's not official yet, but it's expected, right? So I don't know if I'd say for sure South Carolina talking to Schnall, whether they were or not at that point, has anything to do with it.
No, like you said, the postseason aside, it did start to unravel for them about the last month of the season. And yeah, when you have that many injuries and you're going deeper and deeper into your roster, things start to give way quicker than they usually would. And then, when it comes to postseason, man, as we have seen this, I feel like this postseason more than anything, it's a crapshoot. I don't think anybody had Troy and Little Rock playing to go to the College World Series, when the playoffs started. So it really is, baseball is one of these sports where you get hot at the right time and it can take off like a rocket ship. And I think, and then on the flip side of that, it can go south real fast. The ball just doesn't bounce the right way for you on one thing, and then it just can kind of unravel. And I'm sure it played a little bit on the minds of the players. Like, I was, obviously there are some Gamecock fans on the app formerly known as Twitter that were posted a lot of bookmarks from Coastal fans, shortly after the hire was made, or the firing of Maneri was made. And that went on from March till now. Those players are not immune to seeing those things. Like, they knew their coach was being heavily thought of leaving at the end of the season. Those things add up, man. And especially once you start losing a couple games, it can go south real quick.
Absolutely.
So I'm not. Again, he does have a smaller sample size as a head coach than some of the other candidates. But I'm chalking up this end of the year just being, again, they had some injuries, some things didn't break their way. They got really screwed on the rain delay situation with Florida State. Like, that was an absolute cluster down there in Tallahassee. So the end of the Coastal does not give me any pause about bringing him on. I think there was only one other candidate that I think would have been more of a home run hire than Kevin Schnall. I think Kevin Schnall is one of the best young, newer coaches in college baseball, and to get him now, I think, is a huge win for the program for years and years and years down the road.
No, absolutely. And still, even despite the injuries this year, Coastal won 37 games, made it to the postseason, and still had a pretty good – I mean, they were nationally ranked most of the year.
Yeah.
Kind of falling apart a little bit at the end. I think you are right. I mean, if you're a player and you hear back on March 21st or whatever day it was afterwards that these rumors start popping up, and you're playing the next 2 months – I mean, you can't help but kind of let that thought creep into your mind as an 18 to a 22-year-old guy of like, man, what am I going to do next season? Is my coach going to be here? Is his head in the game? There's so many thoughts that I think for anyone in their shoes would kind of be feeling like having a million thoughts run through their head. And I'm sure I think Schnall did such a good job, at least in public, in press conferences and whatnot, of keeping the focus on the season at hand and never really putting it on this job or anything. Again, anytime he talked about this, he never said that he wasn't interested in the South Carolina job or that he was going to be the Coastal head coach for next year. But what he was saying was that he was going to keep the focus on the season at hand throughout the last 2 months there. And, of course, I think he did that. But, yeah, I mean, his success at Coastal is what is getting him this job. Like, went to the College World Series in year one, won 56 games. They went 56-13 in 2025 and lost to LSU in the National Championship Series.
Yep.
So we're talking about a guy from a mid-major program that was able to do that. But before that, he was at Coastal since 2016. I mean, he's won a national championship as the associate head coach under Gary Gilmore back in the day. So this guy has experience in this state, recruiting it. He's a former catcher, an All-American catcher at that, which It seems like catchers make the best managers in both pro and college baseball in a lot of respects. And he's got a lot of ties to the state. So I think that really does matter here. So we'll see. And kind of going along with this, I know we got this comment here from SC Scout guy who says, I do kind of hope that Chris Lemonis is part of the staff. I understand that he's a serious candidate for the Coastal head coaching job, though. Yeah, I have seen that reported by multiple outlets who are covering that Lemonis is on the hot board there. He's one of the top candidates for that job. He's a Myrtle Beach native. He played at the Citadel, went to the College World Series with the Citadel. He's got plenty of ties to the state. He would make a lot of sense to get the job there at Coastal. We'll see what happens if he doesn't, if it goes to somebody else. I know I think his name was like Coach Ox or something.
Yeah, Oxendine. Yep.
Yes. He's the assistant there at Coastal that I think a lot, like kind of like how Monty was viewed as like the player's choice for the coach.
Yes.
24. I think that's kind of what this is now for Coastal here after the 26th season. Who gets the job? I got no clue. We'll see what happens on that front. Maybe Monty Lee will be in consideration. Who knows, right? But yeah, I mean, I think like having some South Carolina connections here, I think would be good. I'm not talking about like a guy that played at South Carolina or anything. I'm talking just like having ties to the state in general from a recruiting standpoint would
Exactly.
be huge. Like if you could have a Monty Lee on staff that knows the state as well as anyone and can help from a recruiting standpoint, yeah, you'd really like to have that. I'm not saying that would be Lee. I don't think that's going to be the case. But and maybe it's Lemonis, who knows? But I think having somebody on staff in addition to Schnall would help out in a lot of ways. That recruiting coordinator position is going to be very interesting to see how South Carolina and Schnall fill that void. It's easy to expect a lot of his coaches and assistants are going to follow him from Coastal to Carolina, but we'll see how the rest of the staff gets filled out, because it wouldn't shock me at all if there are some outside hires made with those positions. But I would say pitching coach and recruiting coordinator are the two main ones you have to nail. And we're going to get into the pitching coach discussion here in a second. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, it sounds like the pitching coach is kind of set up. I think I do think that coach will go outside of his current setup to get a recruiting coordinator. If some of the things that were reported a little bit earlier on about what assistant salary pool might look like, it's going to be one of the better ones in the SEC and the country. So I think you're going to be able to pull away a guy to come in and really hit this recruiting trail on fire. And I just think that the resources that have been rumored to be that are in place for what this program is going to have moving forward, I think is going to be attractive to anybody that's looking to go on to get a head coaching job somewhere else in a couple of years. I think this is a great situation for somebody to come in and do that, because you want somebody that's that ambitious, that they are looking to make their resume look great by building up this team so that they could go on to the next thing. So I think that's kind of the pipeline you want. And I do think that Schnall, would be beneficial to hire somebody kind of outside of that to be a recruiting coordinator, and hit that ground running. But it is now that this has happened, I do expect things to move fast. Once everything gets kind of finalized, I's dotted, T's crossed, and board approval, I expect things to really get cranked up to 11.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be moving quick here, and I see Pete Nakos from On3 has posted a story about 30 minutes ago that South Carolina baseball is trending for multiple transfer targets. Pretty much all of them are from Coastal Carolina, so we will see. A lot of those guys have entered the portal lately, so it's going to be it's going to be moving quick. Like once this hire is official, and honestly even before then, things could be moving really quick. I am surprised we have not gotten anything on a board of trustees meeting. I mean, I think it's probably just figuring out the buyout details for Schnall right now. I think his buyout costs like $600K. So I'm sure South Carolina would pay that no problem. And then it's figuring out, okay, what's the length of the contract? What's the details? How much is he getting paid per year, et cetera. We're going to dive into more stuff on this in a second. But first, real quick, let me tell you guys about our good friend, Andy Ludicky, who has sponsored our baseball coverage throughout the season and now into the summer here in the off season. Andy's a big baseball fan, and from his line of work, he has seen firsthand the fantastic traits that baseball players bring to the franchise world. If you're sick of your job, ready to leave the corporate rat race, want to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy, have a job and want a side hustle, Andy will help you out. He's a franchise consultant as well as a franchise owner, and he helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, passions, and financial requirements. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. Head on over to myperfectfranchise.net to learn more, or you can text or call Andy at 404-973-9901. All right, so let's get back into the conversation here. So we have got the pitching coach news also out there that Matt Williams is going to be following over Kevin Schnall from Coastal Carolina to South Carolina. If that name does sound familiar or ring a bell, it is because he was the pitching coach at South Carolina in 2024 here in Columbia under Mark Kingston. He was here for just one season. But that's a guy that has some SC flavor to him, as a guy that is from this state. He's a South Carolina native, went to Lancaster High School, graduated from college here in South Carolina at Limestone, I believe it was.
Yeah.
He started out at Spartanburg Methodist. So he's from this state. He's coached in this state. He's been a Gamecock before. So all that to be said, this is a very interesting hire that he'll be following him, because he had a lot of success at Coastal Carolina. Was, I believe, the National Assistant Coach of the Year last year. Coastal had like a record-breaking season on the pitching side last year. It was like top 5 nationally in the country. So there's a lot of good pitching out there at Coastal Carolina. We'll see how many of those guys come to Carolina, but you got their pitching coach back here in Garnet and Black.
Yeah, great. I think that was one of the things when I was thinking about the Schnall hire early on, or the possibility of a Schnall coming over, was Matt Williams coming over with him. There's some guys that are in the portal right now, pitching wise, for Coastal, that I will hope are wearing the Garnet and Black next year. I think they would be coming along. But yeah, I mean, the track record kind of speaks for itself. Again, he national assistant coach of the year last year, coached some really good Gamecock pitching, during when he was here. I just think that's a home run hire, and that's one of the big things that you can really hang your hat on this thing getting turned around, hopefully quick, sooner rather than later, is that pitching staff's going to be where it needs to be early, and that's something that can kind of get turned around pretty quickly.
Yeah, you're hoping that's the case. And when you look at what Williams did in his one season here at Carolina, 5.05 ERA, 588 strikeouts, 260 walks in 532 innings of work. That's the collective ERA, which was 6th best in the SEC in 24. Yep. So they had a pretty good pitching staff that year. They lost some guys that you would have liked to have back from that 23 team, like a Jack Mahoney would have been one. You would have liked to have back Will Sanders, Noah Hall, but those guys were off to the MLB draft. I mean, the 23 team had a lot of guys get picked. So,
yes.
Yeah, so you lost some key guys, but I thought there were some really good things. Like, I thought Eli Jones had a great season as the leader of that pitching staff. That was, if I'm not Eli Jerzenbeck was, I think that was the last time he was healthy, because he missed all the 25 season. Now, you know what? No, I'm sorry. He was out that year. He was out in 24. The last time he was healthy was in 23. So forgive me on that. But they had some good pieces on that pitching staff. Garrett Gainey was nice out of the bullpen, and then a little bit as a starter, like Dylan Eskew made some big strides, and he's another guy that is at Coastal now as, I believe he's the director of pitcher development. So I'd be interested to see if he's coming along to South Carolina as well. That's the thing about Coastal. They have a ton of assistants and interns and whatnot. They have a ton of staff members over there. So
yes,
I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that all plays out. And this comment here from Adam, high ERA over 5. Again, that's a collective team ERA. You want me to read off the rest of the ERAs across the SEC in 24? I'll read them all off. Texas A&M 3.86, Arkansas 3.87, Tennessee 3.89, Mississippi State 4.17, LSU 4.36. Then you have South Carolina at 5. Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Bama, Georgia, Missouri, Ole Miss, and Auburn all had ERAs in the 5s, and then Florida had a 6.05 ERA. So I don't think look, the overall number may not look great, but that's the collective staff ERA, because you're going to have guys in there that maybe pitched once or twice throughout the year that ended up with like a 27 ERA or something. When you look at the guys that did do well, it's a different story. So the pitching, I don't think, was the problem in 24 by any stretch. But there were some good things that were done that year. And obviously, You look at what Williams did the following year at Coastal Carolina. Listen to this.
Yeah.
They were ranked second nationally and led the Sun Belt in ERA and WHIP. They finished the year with a 3.22 ERA, the fifth best ERA in Coastal baseball history. And he was named the American Baseball Coaches Association Division I Baseball Assistant Coach of the Year, as well as D1 Baseball's Assistant Coach of the Year in 25. So he's done a very good job in his time at Coastal Carolina. I thought he did a good job here at South Carolina in 24. And I think it is an exciting prospect that he's going to be back here for the 27 season.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I'm just looking over some of the guys now. Chris Veach had a great year that year.
Chris Veach is another one.
Yeah, Chris Veach had a really good year. That was Jake McCoy's freshman year. I know Jake's kind of got to make a decision on what's next for him. But from all things I've seen and heard, he's well liked by staffs. He is going to get the most out of you, and that is, like I said, I'm the excitement that should be around just what honestly the toughness. I mean, I think one of the things that we haven't touched on is just how tough those Coastal teams have been the last few years, especially 25. Like those guys just play with a chip on their shoulder, and I think that comes from the identity of your head coach and what the head coach and the leaders of your team instill. And I think that's gonna be a welcome sight for this program again. That I don't know if we've seen since the late 2000s, maybe early 2010s. We're here. You're going to have a long, bad weekend. We may not win every game, but you're gonna be like, I can't wait for either to get out of Columbia, South Carolina, or I can't wait for the Gamecocks to leave our town. And I just think that that's kind of the approach that Schnall's teams provide. And I think that's going to be a welcome sight for the fan base to have that kind of feeling again amongst these baseball teams.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be very intriguing to see how that's, and I think it goes back to the discussion we had about the small ball style of play. I think that style, along with the grittiness, like if he gets the players in here who kind of fit that criteria, I think this could be something that goes out really well. But time will tell. Time will tell how things go on that. And as we continue this discussion here, I do want to look into the next step here. Like, what do you think for South Carolina is the next step? Like, obviously, you are going to have this contract be – you're figuring out the contract right now. You're figuring out what your staff is going to look like for 2027. And then, beyond that, from what I have heard, you're hoping hopefully by this weekend, you're kind of getting in contact with guys on the current team that you're trying to bring back for 27. So how do you view what is next for this program in terms of okay, you've got your guy. Now where do you go from here?
I think that the staff, if they don't already have it, is going to make up a list, I'd say between 10 to 12 guys. I'm sure they'll probably call on everybody, especially guys that are definitely still on the roster, but guys that may have already entered the portal. They're going to have their list and they're going to pitch them. And then I think that's probably, priority number one. I don't know what the tampering rules are, and I'm not reporting this, but I think that they're already in touch with some of these other guys that are in the portal, that are in the portal from Coastal, and they're kind of locking those down now. And then that will kind of determine on where they think the needs really are on the team moving forward. Because nobody new's entered the portal since the last time we spoke, has there?
Well, there is one guy. Connor Ciccoli entered the portal this afternoon.
Okay.
So we do know that. But yeah, beyond that, I know there's guys that are weighing out decisions as far as – I think a lot of it will come to light after they get to the players on the current team get to meet with Schnall, whether that's going
Yep.
to be a phone call or for some guys it may be in person because they're right here, in
Yep.
South Carolina or still in Columbia. So, yeah, a lot of this stuff about what guys are doing from the current team will probably come out, I would think, within the next few days, hopefully.
Yeah. And I'm interested in this because I think until we hear different, I think we're gonna see a different style of baseball than we've seen the last couple of years. Are there guys that they could be in the portal? They can still be on the roster. Are there any guys that you could see benefiting from this coaching change in their kind of style of play? I'm kind of thinking of maybe a Tyler Bach. I believe he's still on the roster. He seems like
he has not made a decision yet, Bach, on what is next.
Yeah, he seems like a Schnall type guy. Eric Parker seems like he was a high recruit coming out of high school. Good defense. The bat could definitely improve, but he seems like somebody that could be a Schnall type piece. I'm just trying to think of it changes now, right? It's not different staffs like different things. So it's gonna be real interesting to me who the staff kind of prioritizes on bringing back. Guys that we've kind of talked about. Will Craddock, I think, should be the first phone call.
Absolutely.
Then a couple of the pitchers that are in the portal should be amongst their second and third phone calls. So yeah, I'm interested to hear what you think on what the player kind of who do you think would be maybe that we didn't think before might be at the top of, or at least on Schnall's list to keep around.
I think you got to try to keep the in-state guys as best you can. We get the comment here, like a Cooper Parks is someone that has not made a public decision yet that I think would be worth keeping. If you can get Zach Russell back, I would hope you can try your best because he's an in-state guy from the Charleston area. I think you could definitely see, especially now I know he didn't pitch for Matt Williams because he came here in 2025, but I can imagine Zach Russell probably recruited by Matt Williams at one point or another to come to South Carolina. So you want to get your best arms back. I think that's where you probably want to start. But I think you're right. The first phone call needs to be to like those core guys. Like Will Craddock probably needs to be your first call of because again, there's potentially a chance you could get him back. He entered the portal with a do not contact tag, but he hasn't committed anywhere yet. So we will see what that does look like from there. I think you try your best to get Amp Phillips and Jake McCoy back. Amp has not made a formal decision yet, but I think he's going to be a guy that gets drafted this summer. So I think that probably has a lot to do with it. Jake's in the same boat. Jake's a top 150 MLB draft prospect. So he could be someone that gets taken and doesn't, come back to school at all, just because if he gets picked high enough, he's going to probably end up going to the draft. But I do hear there is some potential chance that the Gamecocks could keep him. And I think same would go for Bo Hollins. I do know there is a chance that Carolina could get him back if that's the case. But there's going to have to be, conversations about what that would look like and, if the staff ultimately does want him back. Because it's one thing if guys are interested to come back. It's another for whether or not the coaching staff wants to keep them. So
exactly.
So I could not give you an answer right now as to how many I think are going to come back.
Sure.
Let's set the line at maybe 10, right? I think 10 was how many guys you retained for the 26th season from 25. I would think you could probably get – I think next year is going to be a good mixture of coastal guys that take up most of the roster spots. But I think you're bringing in some guys that are from the 26 team, and then from there you're filling it out with guys from high school and JUCO, and then the transfer portal. So I think there's going to be a good mix of guys on this roster. But I think you have a good chance to retain some of these guys from this past year's team.
Cool. Yeah, no, you love to hear that because, again, you don't want a full roster turnover. I saw the stat floating around yesterday about the teams that had the most transfers that are in Omaha. And the teams with the least amount of transfers. And I think it was Skylar Meads, Troy, led it with like I think 67% of his roster was transfers. But then you had North Carolina down there as low as 24. So I think, it can be done both ways. And to your point, I think this year is going to be a real good mix of guys from his previous team, guys from our team, from the South Carolina team, kind of mixing those, and then really hitting the ground on, really trying to hammer out some of this in-state recruiting stuff, because I'm not familiar with Coastal's high school recruiting ranks, how they were stacked up for this upcoming season, and if what that's going to look like now that coach is looking like he's coming to the Gamecocks for sure.
Yes. So, any more thoughts on what we've learned today? We're going to have more to talk about. We'll probably go live again later this week to discuss more once the contract comes out, once we know more about the coaching staff potentially, and maybe we'll talk after the press conference, whenever that just ends up being.
Yeah.
Any more initial thoughts on just everything that's kind of transpired so far today?
I'm glad we can move forward with it. I want to say that I know people, because the firing happened so early, I know a lot of people expected as soon as one of the candidates' season ended that it would be a done deal, and that we'd move on and this would be done. These things do take time, and I think the athletic department did the right thing by not rushing into anything, and they got their guy. I think everybody. I know, again, there were a couple other candidates that were in the mix, but I think from the jump, this was the guy. They got him. It took a little bit more time than I think people wanted, but it worked out. I think they went about it the right way, and now you got a firm base in place to really have this thing take off the way we're expecting it to. I'm excited for Coach Schnall. I'm excited for his family and everyone else. There's nothing better than being a Gamecock, in my opinion. And I'm happy that he's a part of this program and gets to be a part of this family. And I'm excited to see what's next.
Yes. So we will see where things go from here. Again, there's going to be plenty to discuss. We'll have that conversation continue on here, as always, when we come back on for GC Live, potentially later on this week. But the conversation will always be rolling over on the Insiders Forum on GamecockCentral.com. So head on over there. We've got plenty of coverage and different things to talk about over there with everything that is going down. But yes, South Carolina finally does have its next head coach, and then we'll see where things go from there. So that's going to do it for us for now. But again, we'll be back on here soon. Talk more things about this. Hopefully more details will come out as the days follow, and we'll go from there. So for Gamecock Central, I am Jack Veltri, as always, joined by my co-host and friend, Ethan Carter. We'll see you guys next time, and take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.